So this is the GED's own free practice GED test in reasoning through language arts, RLA. And they give you answers to everything. If you go up here, it'll give you the answer to each question, and it will sort of tell you why you should have picked it. What I'm going to do is a little bit different, which is go through this test as if I were taking it and sort of think aloud the thought process that should get you to the right answer. So if you don't have time for this, definitely go through their explanations, which are good. But here's how I would think about this. So first, I'm going to read the question here before I even start reading the text. Which quotation from the passage supports the idea that Sapid is teaching the narrator a skill that requires patience? So unfortunately, this isn't one where we can just kind of like, oh, that's in paragraph 7, and we can read it and go on. You do have to read through all the text kind of first. And you can't really, it isn't an efficient use of your time to just look for these quotes. You need to get a sense of what this is about. So unfortunately, you have to read it, the whole thing. A, I will be too busy to drink. Does that have to do with patience? Not really. It doesn't really seem like it does. So I can eliminate that one as wrong. Each step was exaggerated and painfully slow. Do you have to be I mean, that isn't a slam dunk, but sort of tiptoeing, which is what Sapid ends up doing here, does kind of like, it's implied that there's patience. So B is like, seems like a pretty solid answer. I'm going to put that in the front of my brain. See if we can eliminate the rest. When we were boys, we practiced with rhinoceros when they were asleep. No, that doesn't. Practicing and patience, I mean, sort of have something to do with each other, but it's sort of a tenuous. You have to go 6 steps to connect them instead of just one. You want something that's a 1-step connection like that one is. The tribe taught me to stalk many other animals. That has nothing to do with being patient. So B is your best answer for number 1. Number 2, read the question, which fact can the reader infer about the narrator? So again, this is the kind of question you can't take really any shortcuts. You need to read the thing to get a sense of the narrator here. He's experienced in working with animals. No, I can't infer that because he is watching somebody else. He's watching and learning. This is a learning experience for him, and someone else is doing the animal working. He's in a hurry to reach his next destination. Well, this whole thing is kind of about patiently watching something happen. And it says later, by the time we finish, it will be too late to travel. And the narrator says, I don't care. Like, he's not in a hurry. So that one is definitely false. You can either remember this specific evidence, or you can kind of get the sense that he's out there watching something slow happen. So that can't be right. He was nervous about traveling in the savannah. I don't know. Doesn't sort of jump out either way to me. I don't sort of remember him being nervous, but we'll say that's a maybe. So C is a maybe. He was raised in the city rather than the wilderness. Well, he definitely doesn't know what he's doing. He's watching someone who does know what he's doing in the wilderness. So there's kind of a sense that this one could be right. If you remember, though, paragraph 20, he mentions New York City. And my parents used to worry about some of the things my friends and I did in New York City. So what that implies, or you can infer, that he was raised in New York City. So D is the best answer. The other ones are too weak. C is too weak. Which definition best matches the use of the word occupied? And so this is one of those questions you can go right to paragraph 16. The sentence is here. You read the sentence. In fact, the only way I could tell he was moving was by looking at the spot he had previously occupied. All right. To have held a spot, you sort of plug in the answers here, kind of like it's a math equation. Looking at the spot he had previously held. That kind of works. So I'm going to leave that one in the running here. To have taken or filled up the spot he had previously filled up, that also works. So A and B both work pretty well so far. We can't eliminate either of them at this point. To have been a resident of, a tenant of, to have dwelt in, all that implies sort of long-term living, like you occupy a house because you live there. So that one doesn't, this one doesn't fit. To have taken possession or control of, like with a military invasion, no, I mean, he's sneaking up on some animals, but In this sentence, he previously hadn't taken possession of the spot. He had just filled up the spot or held the spot. And so we're going to have to look at this second part here, the parts that are in parentheses. So to have held a position or office. This is confusing. I'm not actually in love with this question because to have held a position could mean like in physical space. But what they imply, what they really mean here is a position like a job. So like I occupy the office of the presidency. I don't actually occupy that office, but that's what they mean. That there's sort of like a job, it's a job title that you're holding. You occupy the position of something. And that doesn't really fit here. It only makes sense if you think about occupying a place, specifically, you know, filled up space here. So the answer is going to be B, but this one is confusing. If you could narrow it down to A or B and just guess between them, that's an all right move to make. Anne of Green Gables. So let's read the question first in this excerpt. Anne asks Marilla to call her, or Maria, I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce that in a Spanish way or not, to call her Cordelia. What does this request reveal about Anne? This, again, is not one of those check out paragraph 16 questions. You do have to get a sense for the whole text here. So she tries to make her life more interesting. Well, we see in page 3 here, she starts to say, will you please call me Cordelia? And then Marilla says, call you that. I would love to be called that. It's such a perfectly elegant name. That's kind of as deep as we get into her reasoning, that she thinks it's a perfectly elegant name. Elegant just means kind of fancy. So this one is, yeah, this one, I can't tell why this one is wrong. So I'm going to go to the next one and see if I can find out why this one is wrong. She wishes she could fit in better with her peers. She never says that. She says it's an elegant name. And then later she sort of says, if you're going to call me Anne, at least spell it with an E because it looks nicer. None of this has to do with fitting in with her friends and peers. So it's not B. She feels confused. No. She's upset, but that's different than confused. And it's not, she's not asking to be called a different name because she doesn't know what her name is. We know later that it is. She says what her name is. So it can't be C. She hesitates to share personal details. Well, she's not sharing a ton of personal details here, but she does share her name here. So to me, the reason it's not D, the reason, if I'm narrowing it down to A or D, why I would go with A, is because of that word hesitates. She's not really hesitating to share anything. She bursts out crying, and then she's got sort of a big personality. So hesitating to share things doesn't really fit. So the answer is A there, because you can eliminate the other ones. Order of events. So you have 4 to choose from. You scroll down here. If you look at page 4, this whole thing is a discussion about her name. So as I read through these, Anne tells why she prefers a different name. None of these sort of, this question is a little bit, you have to think a little bit, and you might have to go back to the text. But if you can recognize that all of this is about her name, you know that's going to be the last event. So at least we got 1 down. And then you can sort of go from there. What happens right before they start talking about her name? Well, here's the name begins. Well, right here, don't cry anymore. We're not going to turn you out of doors tonight. This is a little bit tricky because there's actually 2 of these in this one paragraph, in paragraph 14. Marilla says, don't cry anymore, and Marilla decides Anne can stay for the night. This is actually pretty easy because you know that the cry comes, before you can, it's like 1 sentence before. So crying comes here, she can stay for the night. Therefore, without even thinking about it, we know this one has to come first. And it does. If you want to go back and check, you can see that the beginning is Matthew explaining what happened when he went to the train station and why there's a girl instead of a boy. All right, so this next one, drag and drop each word that describes Anne into the character web. So again, we have to go read the whole thing and get a sense of her character. Anne is loud, and she's definitely dramatic. The first thing I'm going to do when I look at this one, to interrupt myself here, is I'll notice that there's 3 spots for Anne and that there's 5 characteristics. And I'm going to sort of look for the ones that are not, that don't really fit. There should be 2 that don't fit here. Is she dramatic? Yeah, she seems pretty dramatic. She wants to give herself a made-up name. That seems like a pretty dramatic move. So that one's going to go into the yes category. Is she practical? I don't see any evidence of her being practical in here, especially the name thing is kind of an argument that she's not very practical to randomly change her name to something that sounds fancier. Is she satisfied? Well, I mean, at the end, she doesn't get, she's asking to be called a different name, which fiddlesticks is the response to that, which means no, or no, what, you know, hogwash, baloney. It makes such a difference. It looks so much nicer. The excerpt ends before she even gets someone to say that they're going to spell her name with an E. There's nothing in here that shows that she's satisfied. So I'm going to keep that one off for now and see if enthusiastic and disappointed can fit. Is she disappointed? Yes. Look at this. You didn't want me. I might have expected it. No one ever did want me. So this sentence actually here is kind of, if she expects it, can you be disappointed if you're expecting to be disappointed? I sort of think you can. She disappointed to me does fit because she was picked up and they were expecting someone else, and so they're disappointed and she's disappointed. It's a whole thing. Is she enthusiastic? Yeah, enthusiastic sort of when she's talking about the name she wants to be called. Or the history of her different names, she gets excited. Enthusiastic and excited are kind of the same thing. All 3 of these are like big, loud character traits. It's like the kind of person who likes drama. You get the sense all 3 of these fit. And the kind of person, both of these things are the kind of person who could be an accountant and doesn't like drama. That wouldn't really fit. So there's your answer for that one. This question is kind of nice because you don't really have to read very carefully anything but the sentence. They're just asking for the correct English way to grammar, basically, grammar, punctuation, that kind of thing. You just need to read the sentence it's in. The speed and power of our Skyview products have been outstanding. No, there's got to be some kind of punctuation after the word outstanding. And you'll see that 3 of them have some kind of punctuation. So the question is it going to be a period or is it going to be a comma? It's not, even though this is kind of like how you might text nowadays, it's this is not a text message. This is a letter, a formal letter. So you want formal, correct English. And a comma here isn't strong enough. The 2 parts of the sentence, or the 2 parts of the text here, are individually full sentences. They need to be. So the problem with A is there's nothing. The problem with C is that there's a comma. I'm looking for either B or D. And the difference is that this thing, always well suited to our needs, that's not a complete sentence. You can't, there's no verb in there. Your products are always well suited to our needs. It just, if you're looking at it and you can't identify exactly why it's wrong, you can sort of smell that this isn't sufficient. It's not enough. This is the only one that is complete and has the punctuation you need. All right, I called Skyview again this morning. The phone call, the only way to do this is kind of like read through it and listen for things that sound off. The phone call lasted about 20 minutes asking for help with my problem. That doesn't, the asking sounds weird to me. There might need to be some kind of punctuation, or the asking needs to be changed to something else. It doesn't sound right. I don't think it's A. Asking for help with my problem, the phone call, no. So again, there's like, needs to be some punctuation and something different here. The phone call lasted about 20 minutes. It is, I mean, if you can look up, I think the explanation will tell you exactly grammatically why it's wrong. But to me, it just like, it sounds clunky. The phone call lasted about 20 minutes as I asked for help with my problem. That sounds like something a fancy person would say. That I can't tell you why that's wrong, so I'm going to go to the next one and see if I can figure out if this smells wrong too. Asking for help on the phone call about my problem lasted about 20 minutes. That one's not terrible, but this one, the one above it, sort of speaks to me as formal and correct. So even though D, there's probably something wrong with it, it's pretty close. You can get it to C and D and then go with your instinct here. We should probably leave this as the correct answer here. Okay, I'm skipping all this other stuff to save time. We are also disappointed that we had to make 6 phone calls, 2 emails, and doing our research before we learn the truth of our situation. So that doesn't sound right to me. And if I thought about it, I would realize that the make 6 phone calls, 2 emails, the make part needs to match up with the doing part. Those 2 verbs need to connect. They need to be the same form. It needs to be make 6 phone calls, 2 emails, and do our own research. Because make and do are the same. Making 6 phone calls, 2 emails, and doing our own research could work if the sentence were weirder and differenter. Jeez. Okay. A is wrong. It sounds wrong because it doesn't follow the same its own internal pattern throughout the whole thing. We were also disappointed that we had to have made 6 phone calls, 2 emails, and our own research. That one doesn't sound exactly right, but maybe it's right. That's a maybe. And we'll go back to see if we can say why that one is wrong later. We're also disappointed that we had to make 6 phone calls, write 2 emails, and do our own research. I can't tell you why that one's wrong at all. So B and C are still in the running. Be making, no. This is a formal letter. You can't be talking like that. That's just sounds too informal to me. So B and C have made 6 phone calls, write 2 emails, and no. There's no verb here. You'll see that there's a doing and a do and writing. All these, researching. All these have verbs except for this one. It just says our own research. What about your own research? Is it appearing or? This is the reason why B is wrong and C is right, because it's missing a word. And sometimes in these tests, you can sort of see, like here in this, or in this one, you can see that they're kind of, first they're checking to see if you're going to notice that you need a punctuation mark here. And then from what's left, they're seeing if you can tell the difference between what's a complete sentence and what's not. If you look here, can you tell that you're going to need to do something in this last part of the sentence? That's the part that's wrong in all the wrong answers. The only one that's right is there. Okay, so if our laptop has a problem which makes it unusable, Skyview should immediately replace it with one that works with its as little inconvenience to it as no, it's a laptop can't be inconvenienced. It has to be a person is inconvenienced. So it has to be an us or a him or both. Doesn't really make sense because that implies it's also like an inconvenience to the laptop. So it's either B or C. With as little inconvenience to him. Who's him? That's just random. It's got to be us. They're the people writing the letter. And even though it's written by one person, you can see at the beginning it's my wife and I. And there's we. So it's gonna be us for this last one. All right, this last group of questions is kind of a social studies question because it deals with history, although it is, reasoning through language arts. You got to read to reason here. So let's read the question. President Truman mentioned the United Nations Commission on Human Rights during his speech in order to show that, all right, well, let's see if we can find where that is. If you remember, it comes kind of towards the end here. Additionally, the president cited the United Nations Commissions on Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt's. Okay, so he cites it here. So why does he do this? to show how civil rights legislation worked outside the United States. Do they ever? They never talk about how it works. It doesn't show how civil rights legislation works. So this one can't be right. His general support for civil rights in the United States and abroad. This one is pretty broad. It's kind of like, meh. So I can't say why it's wrong. So we'll keep it in the running for now and see if we can eliminate these other ones. He cites it in order to show how the United States had learned valuable civil rights lessons from other countries. Does it ever talk about learning from other countries? No. So that's not right either. It's not A, it's not C. His belief that the United States had civil rights policies that should be adopted by other countries. Maybe. I mean, it's going to be either B or D. If you can get it down to those two, you're in pretty good shape. He doesn't really talk about, I mean, this is a speech that's focused on the United States. And, you know, he urged Americans to work together in sort of World War II, but through the context of what the Americans were doing to win it. This one seems stronger than me. It's kind of a general, seems like a general kind of question. And I can't tell you any reason why it's wrong. What approach did Eleanor Roosevelt take to encourage the acceptance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? A, no way. She wants to kick off people who disagree with her. There's nothing in there about that. And that's kind of against the whole point of a universal Declaration of Human Rights. This one is almost so wrong, it's supposed to be funny. She warned of the problems that would occur if all nations had different civil rights policies within their borders. Maybe? I don't remember her doing that anywhere in here, but that seems like, I don't know. It's not strong, but it's not so wrong that I can eliminate it. So B's a maybe for now. She acknowledged the difficulty of convincing other nations to agree on common. Yeah, she does do that. She talks about how it's hard to get all these different countries together to agree on an idea of democracy. I think it's on page 5 somewhere here. Yeah, it's here. That's like literally from the text. So that's definitely a stronger answer than B. I can find it in the text. The answer is going to be C. We'll read D just to make sure it's wrong. But she compared the abstaining nations with the voting nations and suggested that the difference between them were insignificant. What that says to me is the United States and the Soviet Union are the same. And she does not say that. She talks about how they are different here with, you know, you could shut down a newspaper in the USSR, the Soviet Union, if it says things that are mean about the government. So it's definitely not D. C is the best answer. All right. Now, I'm not going to write this essay out for you, but it is helpful. This one is, I want to point some things out before we say goodbye. One, that this is exactly like the essay you'll get on the test. The essay will have 2 different points of view, and it will be your job to write about which one is better supported, best supported. That is, if I can give you any piece of advice, it's to focus on that phrase, which is best supported, not which one do you agree with. Nobody cares what you agree with. In order to get the 6 points, you need to do a couple things. One, you need to have an argument. The argument needs to be clearly defined. You know, argument, this guy's argument is better supported because of these reasons, and here, let me get into them. It needs to be developed in a logical way. Reason number 1 is this. Reason number 2 is this. Reason number 3, it's better supported, is this. You also need to write well. We're not going to, obviously, in the video, we're going to explain how to write well, but spelling doesn't matter, but all the other stuff does. So punctuation and, you know, sentence complexity, that kind of stuff. Be thinking about that. The other thing I am going to just show you, it's worth clicking on the answer explanation here because it explains. This stuff is a little abstract. You need to create an argument and use evidence. You need to develop your ideas and have good structure and then command English well. But they have sample essays that will get you the full 2 points for each of these categories. And it's worth reading those things. So I guess all I said on the last one is just like, look at their explanation. All right, I hope this was helpful to see how to think about these questions in order to get to the right answer. You could always just go through and click on all the answer explanations. That's pretty good too. Good luck.